All right. Happy St. Patty's Day, everyone, and welcome to the Water Ambassadors Program. Water Ambassadors is a partnership program between Martin County and the University of IFAS Extension, Florida Sea Grant. It is a stormwater education program designed to educate Florida residents about stormwater management, and ways that you all can participate in reducing our stormwater pollution and improving water quality in the state and in the Treasure Coast region, in Martin County specifically. Um, this QR code and phone number there is a link for you all. If you're in Martin County and see something that you shouldn't regarding stormwater, please report it. Our main program is a webinar program, and happy to share our next 3 months of topics for you. In April, webinars are always on the third Tuesday of every month. In April, we have Dr. Monica Wilson with the University of Florida, who's going to be talking about Operation TRAP, which is trap reduction for aquatic preserves. This is a project that they've been doing in the Big Bend region, and we are looking to bring it to the Treasure Coast. So we hope that you all can join us, learn a little bit more about it, and maybe help us identify opportunities and areas for bringing this to the region. In May 19th, we actually have a presentation title change already from the email that I sent you all yesterday. So Dave Tomasco is going to be talking about ecosystem scale water quality and natural systems restoration. And then in June, we're going to have Daniel Willis with the Florida Lake Watch program talking about that program and how you all can participate. So we are going to be accepting questions through the chat feature in Zoom. We will have the presentation and hold all questions until the end. So we ask you all to participate, but just put them in the chat and we will get to them in the order in which they come in after the presentation today. And with that, I am pleased to introduce our presenter for today, Kathy Hills, the Deputy Director of the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. Kathy graduated from the University of Massachusetts and came to Florida in 1995 to pursue a master's degree in marine biology. She graduated from Florida Institute of Technology and then worked 9 years at the Smithsonian Marine Station before joining the NEP in 2007 as the Outreach and Education Coordinator. In 2016, Kathy became the Communications Director and is now the Deputy Director. Kathy works on developing and aligning the program's internal and external communications, public engagement strategies, managing contracts, developing print, web, social media publications, and today she is going to be talking to us about the recently published 2025 Indian River Lagoon Economic Valuation Study. So thank you, Kathy, for joining us for the Water Ambassador Program, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks everyone for being here today, and thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Come on. There we go. Can you all see that?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, good. So I'm going to be talking about the update to the economic evaluation for the Indian River Lagoon. And I do want y'all to keep in mind, I'm a biologist, not an economist, so don't ask me anything too hard. But I'm going to try my best to get through all of the pertinent information here today. So the things I'm going to go over, just a quick overview of the project, and then talk about ecosystem services value, because that was one of the major things that the Balmoral Group, who did this study for us, evaluated. Then we're going to talk about the economic valuation update for the lagoon. That's a very big jump from the previous number that was done in 2016. And then I do want to show you one of the things they did for us was create this socioeconomic profile of each community in the lagoon region, and also a dashboard. So for those of you who are doing any kind of demographic research or anything like that where you need to know, figures and data, there's a really good useful resource for you. So I'll show you that today as well. All right. So just jumping in, this was a 2-year study we enlisted the Balmoral Group to do for us. And it was an update to the 2016 economic valuation that was done by the Treasure Coast and East Central Florida Regional Planning Councils. So they did that economic valuation only as far as industries and services that have economic value that were impacted by the lagoon. So they didn't look at anything like healthcare or education or anything like that. It was only the industries that had something to do with the lagoon. So this was a little bit different from the previous economic study. And so I do want to say just right off the bat, you can't directly compare those two because they're not directly comparable. But in phase one of this new study, they did the socioeconomic profiling for us. They did some case studies. We identified case studies from our NOAA grant where they wanted to look at ecosystem services value and what the return on investment is for those kinds of projects. So they did that under phase one with the dashboard. And then in phase two, they did the remainder of the work to do the actual economic valuation and kind of tidy up everything and get it all together into a package that was public facing. So if we look at ecosystem services values, we'll start with that. And now, for those of you who might not know, ecosystem services are the benefits that we receive as humans from nature. So this can be stuff like food, timber, fishing products, all of that kind of thing. It might be benefits that arise from natural ecosystem processes like, flood control or coastal protections. It might be beneficial services like providing habitat or nutrient cycling in the environment. Or it could be recreational opportunities. So opportunities for tourism, quality of life benefits for people living near the water or using the water, human health benefits, things of that nature. So in the region, we are really rich in ecosystem service resources. So if you see in the graphic there, 940,000 acres of natural and agricultural lands hold back over 100 billion gallons of floodwaters every single year for us. We've got almost 53,000 acres of natural lands that provide coastal protection, 368,000 acres of land that provide water filtration and purification services, and of course, taken together, these lands generate habitat, aesthetic value, property value, recreation value for us. So we are really fortunate. And the take-home message here for all of this is that the benefit of having those lands intact and providing those services is that that's money that we don't have to spend. So we don't have to spend money on additional flood control if we have an intact ecosystem service providing that for us. Think about if the region were entirely built out. If this region looked like Miami, for example, we would be spending lots and lots of dollars in flood control infrastructure and water filtration infrastructure, purification infrastructure, and coastal protection. Now, when you take all of these together, they add up to about $10 billion. And I'm going to go through some of these with you just so you can get a feel for how they arrived at these numbers, because the numbers are huge and like almost to the staggering value. So recreational value is about 6.8 billion, and that includes things like fishing, boating, shoreline activities, all the usual things you would expect from that. The aesthetic value includes a property value number, and this number is mostly property value. And so I'll go over that and show you how they arrived at that number. Habitat quality is $1 billion in habitat quality value, $500 million in water quality benefits, almost $500 million in flood mitigation risks, $250 million in coastal protection, and then a small amount in $3.7 million in commercial fishing value. And with the commercial fishing value, they only looked at lagoon species of fish. So it was strictly, they didn't include anything offshore. They didn't include the folks that maybe have their boats in the lagoon but go offshore. This was strictly lagoon-based fishing. All right, so if we look at the aesthetic value first, this was a pretty cool part of the research. They used these hedonic models, which kind of tease out a particular thing. So what they were looking at, and let me orient you on the map first, the really warm green colors are the properties closest to the water, and if you look at the valuations, those are the more expensive premiums on real estate value. The colder colors, the blues and the blacks, are properties further away from the water and therefore less of a premium on them. So what they wanted to figure out in this part of the study was to see how close a property had to be to the lagoon to have some kind of real estate value premium on it. And you can see anything up to 1,500 meters had some kind of a premium on it. And what they did to determine this, they looked at sales values and they held everything constant except for the proximity of the home to the lagoon. So just as an example, you take a 3-bedroom home with 2 bathrooms on a 1/4-acre lot with no pool, and look at it from top to bottom against all the counties, and the only thing that changes is where the house is with respect to the lagoon. And so that gives them the premiums for how close to the water the property has to be, and then what your premiums are. And you can see from the maps, if you're in Indian River County with the house within 100 meters of the lagoon, that estimated sales premium per property is about $660,000. And then in Palm Beach County, the same house with the same number of bathrooms and bedrooms and square footage and all of that is worth almost $1 million more. So this will vary by county. And I think my next slide shows you that. So you can see the various premiums for these properties. And so in Indian River County, if you look at the total, and this chart is in millions, so anytime you see something that is, say, 3,000, that's $3 billion. So Indian River County has a total benefit or economic value to the regional economy of $3 billion. In Volusia, it's about $1 billion. In Brevard, it's about $6 billion. St. Lucie, $1.5 billion. Martin County is $5 billion. Palm Beach County, $5 billion, for a total of 22.9. And then if you annualize that, which they did to just kind of show an annual total, that comes out to about 1.37 billion per year. And then if we look at habitats, so FWC has really detailed and geo-referenced habitat data for the whole state. And so what Balmoral did in this case, they used the FEMA ecosystem services values combined with the FWC data and kind of crosswalked those values across the whole lagoon. And you can see in this area, these were the habitat types that they looked at. Here are the FEMA estimates per acre, and then the number of IRL acres. And you can see the total habitat value is over $1 billion in ecosystem services. And then with water filtration, kind of the same idea. They use the FEMA ecosystem service values again with the acreages from FWC. And in the map here, the warmer colors, let's see, yep, the warmer colors are the least valuable ones. So the whiter ones are least valuable, the darker ones are the most valuable. And again, we get $500 million. If you add these up, $500 million in water filtration benefits on an annual basis. And then this 38 million, this is the value that gets added when our NOAA projects are completed. So they looked at, in this region, there were a number of NOAA projects that we had, and some of those were used for the valuation. And they projected the cost over 10 years for these projects, and then the benefits for 10 years of these projects. And when those projects are completed and in place, that's going to add another $38 million to ecosystem water filtration improvements from these projects. All right. Coastal protection, they used a slightly different model for this one. So this is the INVEST model, which is a Stanford University product. It's pretty well regarded. It's open source, so anybody can use it. For land cover data, they use the FWC data and kind of just calculated the difference in exposure to coastal hazards with and without intact natural processes in place. So where you have mangroves, and you can see here, this is Martin, it's the county line. Martin County is in the northern part of this graphic. Right here is the county line between Martin and Palm Beach County. And so you can see the oyster beds and some mangrove fringe here, and then more up here and over here. This is the North Fork down here. So what they did was they just estimated where you have coastal protection like mangroves and oyster beds, if those things are there and functioning, what's the value? And then if they're not there and they're not functioning, what's the value? And so again, we get this benefit of about $250 million in protection from having those ecosystems there. And just to talk a minute about our NOAA Habitat Restoration Grant, this was a $9.4 million grant over 3 years. We've got 10 partner organizations working with us, and we are restoring 7 different types of habitats, and you can see those there. I'm not going to read them to you. And if we go to the map, so you can see here on the map where they're spaced out. A lot of them are in the Northern Lagoon, Mosquito Lagoon region, but they space out all the way down the coastline, all the way down to FOS in Martin County. So overall, we've got our seven habitat types. We're going to do 73 acres of seagrass, 7 acres of oyster reefs, planting 22 million clams, 2,000 acres of wetlands, 8,000 feet of shoreline, and installing fish passage in the Begum site in Indian River, which is down here, number 8, I believe. Yeah, number 8. And then 3 demonstration fish reefs. So that's kind of our target goal for this project. None of these projects taken by themselves are particularly transformational, but all of them together, taken as a whole, are going to be what we believe to be transformational for the lagoon. And we asked Balmoral to sort of assess that for us. And what they did, go into this here, they looked at cost-benefit ratios, or benefit-cost ratios for this. And what they did was they picked, now all of these, let me go back to the map, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused myself. So if we look at all of these projects on the map, all of them are restoring more than one habitat type. So if you look at Karen Bay, for example, Karen Bay is restoring, let's see, living shorelines, salt marshes, and clams. And then when we asked Balmoral to assess, they picked a particular habitat type. And what they were looking for in all of these cases was sort of a middle-of-the-road habitat type. They didn't want the very best one that's going to return the highest numbers, and they didn't want the very worst one. They wanted one that was going to keep the model conservative and come up with a real number for all of these. So they wanted a real number at the end, not something that was inflated or deflated. So Karen Bay, they picked salt marsh. And when you add up the total costs of what it's going to be to keep the Karen Bay salt marsh in service for 10 years, that cost is about $383,000. The benefits come out to about $2.7 or $2.8 million. And when you do a ratio of those, it's a ratio of 7.3 benefit to cost. Now, you can look and see how they went through all of these other ones. Some of these end up being really high value. For example, the St. Johns River Water Management District project in Merritt Island, that one comes out to a benefit cost ratio of 59.8 with an overall benefit of over $55 million. And that restored about 2,000 acres of wetlands up in Merritt Island. The other one that's pretty big is the Begum Fish Passage, and this is going to be improving fish nursery benefits to the lagoon, and that one has a benefit cost of 54.7. So all of these, when you look at benefit cost ratio, the only thing you have to remember is that you want a number at the end that comes out over 1. If you have a number under 1, that means you spent more on the project than you're getting back from it. So as long as your number's over 1, that means you're getting back from it more than what you're putting into it. And when we add all of these up together, the return on investment value is a 24-to-1 return on investment. and which is huge. You get $24 going back into the regional economy for every $1 you spent on restoration. And even when you take out the really high value ones, so even if you remove Merritt Island and Begum from that equation, it's still a 10-to-1 return on investment. So restoration is not only has costs, but it has benefits as well. All right. Moving on to the economic valuation. You may remember the number of 7.6 billion from the 2016 economic valuation. And that was 10 years ago. We've had a lot of growth and a lot of folks moving in since then. So our new valuation number is quite a bit bigger. And again, it only reflects lagoon adjacent industries, so things that have to do with the lagoon. And again, not things like education, not things like healthcare, none of that. And I'll show you how that rolls out. If you're interested in these studies, you can go to our homepage at onelagoon.org. All three products are on there, and the dashboard is there as well. And I'll show you how at the end to get to those. So you can get there either through our homepage or through our documents page. But getting back to the valuation, the new number is 28.3 billion annually in economic impacts. And what that reflects is, so we've got direct impacts, and again, for those of you who aren't economists, I'm just going to go through these numbers with you so you kind of have some orientation to it. Direct impacts are the economic activities where somebody, say if you're a boat builder and you're going to build 10 boats this quarter, you take your money and you have to buy supplies to get enough materials to build your 10 boats. So that's what a direct impact is. Indirect impacts are the business-to-business impacts. So whoever you get your materials from, who sells to you, that's an indirect impact. And then when you pay your staff to go and build your boats, and they go and spend their money for things like groceries and rent and whatever else they do, those are induced impacts. So direct, indirect, and induced impacts all add up to the total impact. And then we also have a number here which is called value added, and this is the GDP. So this is the gross domestic product, which is the total. Make sure I'm saying this right. Yeah, it's the total for the local, regional, and state economy. So this includes things like tax money and all that kind of thing. Employment-wise, direct employment benefits, 71,000 jobs, indirect 33, induced 23, for a total of 128,400 jobs, with $8 billion in labor income. And then when you add all those together, the total output to the economy is 28.288 billion, so $28.3 billion. And I'm not going to try to explain this model to you, except to say that the implant model is what they use. So if you're familiar with that, that's what the model used was. And what implant does is it kind of measures the effects of spending as dollars go through the economy. So you can take estimates of cash flows and economic impacts as measured by jobs and indirect spending and things like that. And the way I can best explain this to you is through an example, so I'm just going to show you this. We've got two kind of scenarios here. So, and these are the sectors that they looked at for the economic valuation. So they looked at boating, tourism, fisheries, natural resources, management, and the aerospace sector, because of the jobs and the quality of life benefits that all of those folks are gaining from being on the lagoon or being near the lagoon. All of those were inputs into the implant model. And then implant calculates specific outputs based on how those dollars flow. So, for example, if you look at on the left, if you've got a boat builder, the boat builder builds a boat. So the sales generate direct impacts, indirect, and induced impacts within the county where the business is and where the boat gets sold. So if the boat is sold in county, you get all of those benefits, direct, indirect, and induced. If the boat goes out of county, you don't get the same benefits. So the induced impacts don't stay in the county, and so those don't get counted. And in-plan accounts for all of that. And so just to orient you on that, I didn't want to go through that whole model just to say that, but the impacts are different based on whether the product stays in the county or goes out of the county. And the models account for those conditions. And then the other thing I wanted to show you here is just sort of the impact. Recreational spending is the biggest impact in the economy, so I did want to run through that with you. Residents and visitors contribute to recreational spending in the lagoon. FDOR, which is Department of Revenue, and Visit Florida data, Balmoral looked at 14 categories of spending from both of those data sources. Visitorship in Florida has increased hugely since COVID and in the subsequent years. So they're estimating now in 2024 we had 143 million visitors in Florida, and the lagoon region accounts for about 18 million of those. And so what they did was they just went through the model, looked at how dollars flowed, and just based on recreation alone, that ends up being about 75,000 jobs, $3 billion in labor income, 5.5 billion in GDP, for an overall valuation of 10.5 billion, just in recreational spending. And then you can see the other categories here: natural resources management, and you can follow those numbers through. Commercial fishing, which again is way down from what it used to be. Boat dealers, aerospace industry, and the annualized property value total. And so again, this is just another way of adding up everything in the economic valuation, but doing it by sector this time. And we come out to that 28.3 billion. All right, and then lastly, the socioeconomic dashboard. Again, if any of you are doing anything with demographic data, this is a really good resource. We've been playing around with it ourselves just a bit to see what kind of information we can glean from it. You can look at things like population trends, age and gender demographics, educational attainment, employment and labor force, industry workforce, so there's a by industry sector there, income statistics, housing data, priority community specific metrics, and then things like taxes. So if you were interested, and we did this just as a little, thought problem in the office, just looking at the valuation of what counties pay in taxes at the federal, local, and state levels, you can see things like that. And so you can get down here on the bottom where the graphs are, you can see it's by sector, what each sector contributes to the tax base, locally, statewide, and federally, and then you can get your total valuations here. So this is, again, really useful tool if you're doing anything where you need that kind of background. It's on our website. Feel free to use it and to cite it to the Balmoral Group. They did really good work on that. And so our key takeaways then, the lagoon is an economic driver of the regional economy. We probably all have known this, but this is, evidence upon evidence, $28.3 billion worth just from the IRL. It makes the lagoon worth protecting and investing in. For every dollar spent on lagoon restoration, we get 24 back in benefits. And these numbers reflect, and this is important to say, these numbers reflect the lagoon's current condition, so the lagoon as it is right now. If we continue to heal the lagoon and make it better and make water quality improvements and habitat improvements in it, we would expect these numbers to increase. We can bring back world-class fishing and all of the recreational benefits that we used to get before super bloom time. And then lastly, just again, I'm going to refer you to our website. So we've got 3 documents. The first one is the Part A of the technical report, which is the socioeconomic profiles, the case studies, and the performance of those case studies. The second one is the economic valuation part of things. And then, yeah, for those of you who just need the headlines, we also have a quick 4-page, graphic-heavy economic executive summary. So if you just need, the big ideas, that executive summary is going to be your friend. Again, all of those accessible from our homepage, but if you also go to our documents page, which is this link right here, you can get all of those as well. And with that, I thank you, and we'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Kathy. We do have a couple questions in the chat. The first one comes from Vincent and I was wondering about for Palm Beach County, did they just tease out the areas of the county that are considered part of the IRL for
Yeah,
getting that valuation?
I don't believe that they used the whole county. We gave them sort of shape files to work in, and I think that was what they did, yes.
Okay, great. Erica asks, does NOAA have internship opportunities for recent college graduates?
Actually, if you are associated, well, our NOAA projects actually have, we were just talking before the meeting, we have an opportunity for 15 interns under our NOAA grant. And if you want to shoot me an email, you can see my email there. Depending on how closely you are out of college, we might be able to plug you into something on one of these projects. But yeah, shoot me an email. We can talk about it, and we do have slots that aren't filled yet, so that might be an opportunity.
Someone asked about whether or not this would be shared, and so we did put the links that you provided in the chat for everyone so they can access all of the reports. Bob says that restoration of 7 acres of seagrass was mentioned. Is that planting of seagrass?
Yes. So
Okay.
all of those are planted acres.
So then the question continues on. Seagrass has largely recovered in the southern Mosquito Lagoon and a few other areas without planting. Doesn't this say that we should be spending our money on water quality improvement largely through reduction of nutrient loading rather than planting without solving the cause of seagrass decline?
Yeah, I mean, I'm team water quality all day long. However, I will say, we're not going to plant our way back to 143,000 acres of seagrass. That's just an impossibility. However, we are seeing in some places that if you kind of, Johnny Appleseed some seagrass beds, and protect them and give them the opportunity, as long as things stay good and you don't get big disturbances like enormous algae blooms and herds of manatees that come through and eat it all. You have the opportunity where these things might stay around long enough that they can reproduce and start filling in on their own. And that was sort of the hope for the planting of the seagrasses. We went into this knowing that we weren't going to plant our way out of the problem, but there is the hope that you can have a patch of seagrass hang around long enough that it reproduces and starts feeding other areas.
Thanks, Kathy. The next question, Nick from FOS says, "Hi, Kathy. When you
Hey,
were
Nick.
discussing when you were discussing the value of oyster reefs, I noticed you focused on only one section of it. Did they do this with all the natural reefs, and did they consider the ones in the St. Lucie estuary or no?"
So when they were talking about the economic valuation, they were talking about the valuation. So they had to use our NOAA projects to do that. And that was where those numbers came from. So what the reefs that they looked at were the ones being restored under the NOAA grant.
Okay, thank you. And then we have someone who is in Martin County and interested in growing clams and oysters and is looking for guidance on how to move forward, how to do that. I know this is outside of the topic.
Yeah,
So
if
I
he
don't
was in Brevard, I could give him to the zoo and it would be easy. Um, they might want to get in touch with Florida Oceanographic. They've got volunteer programs for oysters and seagrass, so that might be a good avenue for them to get started with. And I don't know, Vincent, if you want to say anything about anything you might know about.
No, I think Florida Oceanographic. Is there, did Lisa, did you say that this person was in Martin County?
In Martin County, yes.
Yeah, I think Florida Oceanographic would be
Yeah.
the
So
probably
yeah,
the
that
logical.
would be the best bet then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, that is the questions that we have in the chat. We can hang on maybe for another minute, see if anything else comes through, but I want to say thank you, Kathy, for a great presentation as well as for supporting this work through the NEP. It's extremely important for us to have a value of the lagoon as well as all of the restoration efforts that
Yeah,
are
yeah.
ongoing. So thank you for supporting that and for willing to present this to the
Yeah,
water
you're
ambassadors.
welcome.
All right, there are no other questions. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on April 21st for our next presentation on trash reduction in aquatic preserves. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks.